Hello and welcome to Tremendous Tableau Tips. My name is Heidi Kalbe and this is Tore Levinsen. And together we're hoping that you are ready to get your socks tablown off because that's what you're here for. So before we get started, just a couple forward-looking statements. Please don't make any investments regarding Tableau based on what you're seeing today. You know the drill. So let's dive in. Who are we actually? You may be used, so some of you who've been here before for these sessions may be used to seeing Tore and I together with Annabelle, the third in our Tremendous Tableau Tips trio, right? Mark the alliteration. But Annabelle decided to let the two of us play by ourselves this time. So if you want to see Annabelle back with us on stage again, please tell her so. We would love to have her back with us. But for today, you'll have to deal with just Tore and I. So as I said, hi, my name is Heidi Kalbe. I'm an associate solution expert at Woodmark. I'm also a 5-time Tableau ambassador. I co-lead Data Plus Women here in Germany, which is open to everyone across all the gender spectrum, so please join us. I also co-lead Rhineland Tableau user group, an in-person user group in Germany. And if you want to connect, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm looking forward to your message.
And hello, my name is Tore. I'm from Norway. I'm also an ambassador, only for 4 years, not as good as Heidi, even though I'm way older. I'm also running a user group, the Norwegian user group, and also co-lead the Data Plus Maps user group, which is virtual. The Norwegian ones are hybrid ones, so please sign up and join us as well. I work in Meta Consulting here in Norway. I've been doing Tableau for 12 years, doing a lot of training. I've trained 3,600 people in 16 countries so far. So if you would like some training, hit me up as well. I'm not sure if I have any cool QR codes, anything, but I do have some Tableau tips for you. So we'll start with some tiny ones because I love to do tiny Tableau tips. So if you follow me on Blue Sky or X, you will see those every Wednesday. And now I'm going to start with a simple one, and that's a quick level of detail calculation. A lot of you I've heard over the years have a bit of struggle to both create those level of detail calculation, but also the syntax. Really annoying, right? When you add a sum or something, you get the parentheses in the back and the front. But if you do the fixed or include exclude, you need to find out what should I click on the keyboard to get that curly bracket in the end. So if you take any measure, holding the control key, at least when you are using a PC. If you're using a Mac, I think you should hold in the command key. You drag this one on top of any dimension and you let go. You will then have a new calculation down here. I can go and say edit and obviously put it on the right screen. And you see that I have now a quick level of detail calculation and the curly bracket is there already. And then obviously you can adjust accordingly like you would like to. Another thing I mentioned, I'm co-hosting the Data Plus Maps, and I love to use maps, obviously. Who doesn't? And this is a nice little trick. I haven't found necessarily the best use case for it. Otherwise, we're getting into maybe a holiday season and you would like to do some quiz on your friends. So when you have a filled map like this, if you get rid of latitude and longitude, you basically get the shapes of all the countries or cities or states or whatever your data level is in the view. You could, of course, adjust the size a bit to make sure that you get everyone in there, and then you can add in whatever data you like. You can sort them, and then you can look around, see if you find Norway, and I know that Norway looks like this, so I could find it, and here it is. So this is one way of finding those shape files for all your geodata. Another thing that I see a lot, and also when I'm working with data like this, let me just change this to a map. And if I only would like to look at data for Norway, well, I'm from Norway. I have a lot of people that I build dashboards for, or I'm helping people, and they would like to look at data only for Norway, which is fine. So I can keep only. And then obviously I've already cheated a bit in here. So I'm just going to check the background layers, because this is the trick that already was shown. You see that we can see Sweden, Finland, and everything around Norway. And that's fair enough, but since I only maybe have data for Norway, why should I see Sweden? Why should I see Finland in my data? So now I can redo what I just did, because this is one of the things we can do. We can go to the map menu up here, and then we can go to our background layers, and we'll see that you have a lot of stuff that you can do over here. But if you do the washout and you have a filled map, you will have Norway, and you get rid of those. Well, put in whatever word you like, Swedish on the right hand side, Finland as well. And now the good thing about Tableau and the geospatial data, I haven't linked my data plus TV dataset with my sample EU Superstore, but now I can drag in my cities, put those as a new layer without even connecting them. Obviously, Tableau thinks that since Tableau is from the States, it thinks that also all these cities like Oslo, which is the capital of Norway, is also in the States. And yes, there is a Oslo, there is a San Fernando and Nice in the States, but Tableau is now by default saying that the country region is United States. I could switch this over to Norway, but since I do have in my data, I do have the actual Norway over here, sorry, the country. So if I drag this into detail, we see that our cities are moving all over to Europe. And I now should also just add a filter for Norway for the cities as well, like this. And then I have my cities. But you see that Norway is like flickering in the background when I move over like this. I would like to look at the circles, and maybe I even have some sales on those circles. I would like to see which one is bigger or smaller, and some of these are even dropping away. So now when we're using these map layers, we have the cities and we have the country layer in here. So I can go to my country layer and say disable selection. So this is not selectable. See that when I move my mouse over, it doesn't flicker. And then I can look at Bergen, where I live, and Stavanger, Sandnes, Oslo, etc. in here. So that's a nice way of make sure that if you have multiple layers, you don't necessarily want to show them. And an extra tip in here is that when you put this in a dashboard, people tend to either zoom in or click, and then they need to click on this to get back. You can also go to your map menu and go to map options and then say, I don't want my end user to allow pan and zoom, because then they mess up the map, or suddenly they're in the north of Norway and they don't see any data because everything is in the south. So all of these map options that we have available over here, those are available for you to turn on and off as well. So I'll move on to a new tip. We're looking at the average IMDb series rating on one axis over here. So we see that New Beard Tours have an average rating of 10, but only 7 votes. We have some more popular TV series, Game of Thrones, with 2.3 million votes. Also, there's a lot of, and way too many colors in here, obviously, because there's so many genres. So you could then, if you have this turned on or off, that depends on your setup. But if you have ever looked at your tooltips and you hover over anything that is a dimension, so a time dimension or just an ordinary dimension like this, if I click on Breaking Bad, it highlights, well, there's only one Breaking Bad, so that's fine. But if I click on crime, it highlights everything that's connected to crime. And then if I click on 2008, it highlights everything based on, or looking at 2008. If that doesn't work on your setup, click on the tooltip on the marks card, and then make sure that allow selection by category is ticked off, because if you turn it off, then that doesn't work. There's another quick tip while we're at it, because a lot of people, by default, when you get the tooltip, you get to keep only, exclude, and everything on this menu. And sometimes you don't want people to go in here and suddenly keep only something, or exclude something, or mess up your beautiful visualization. So if I now go to tooltip and turn off, no, not turn off the tooltip, because that's obviously something you can do, but the include command buttons. If you say OK, go back to my tooltip, you see that there's nothing on the top here. It's just a tooltip. It's clean. It's nice. Obviously, you can format and make it nice as well. So we're moving on. We have some more tips. I've created a set over here where I have the top 10 customers. Those customers are in my set. The rest of them are out of the set. But in, out, couldn't we have a better word? And if I do this in Norway, I would like to have a Norwegian spelling. Heidi would like to have some German spelling, perhaps. So we obviously do your best friend in Tableau. You right-click. You can edit the alias. So you can say that best customers ever, and that's what's in the set. And if you reuse the set anywhere else, that alias will stick. So bad customers. So if I now add in this set again, it doesn't say in out, it actually says a proper name. And continuing with a tip on aliases, I have a data set, a beautiful data set in my second favorite tool, Excel. So I'm just going to now copy some data here. That's also a tip. Control C. Go back to Tableau and do Control V. So you can do that with any data from either text file, a CSV file, Excel, web page, whatever. Just paste it in there. You see that now I have missing values in here. And I can't just right-click and say Edit Alias. That doesn't work. So it is a date. That's why, or that's the initial problem. So there's a couple of things we need to do. First, we need to change our date to a string. Now I can right-click and edit the alias, saying no dates here, and say OK. It works. Beautiful. But I would like to treat this dimension as a date. So I'll go over here and go back and say date, and it's back to null. It doesn't keep it. And here's the extra tip from my nemesis, Kimberly Scott, that showed this at TC earlier this year when she beat me at the tip battle. The data source that you're using, if you can create this as an extract, so I'm just going to extract my data. You see that suddenly it says no dates here. We still have a date, and the date is still a date and not a string. So a workaround to a workaround to a workaround there, but it's a nice little tip. If you do create a lot of parameters, you know that you can go over here, you can create a parameter, and if you're going to have a list of a lot of values, you could obviously start writing everything in here, and it's fixed. Or you can go to when the workbook opens. Maybe I would like to have all my, sorry, this is a float, so I'm going to make it a string, so that I can actually see some stuff in here. I can do segment, and then I get all my segments. If the workbook opens again, I get the new ones in there. But then I still need to write these or copy these or get hold of these somehow when I would like to create a calculation, because a parameter doesn't do anything unless it's connected to something, to a data source with a calculation, for example. So I can't Control C, select everything from over here. So this is one way of building the parameter. Another way, obviously, if you don't want to spell or write everything and you just want the exact values of a dimension. So let's say we would like to create on this segment. We can always right-click, create parameter from here, and it will fill it automatically. But once again, we can't copy-paste this when we create our calculation. So there's obviously a workaround again. I do have my subcategories in here because I'm going to create a calculation. And this calculation is taking, because I'm going to now do a case statement on my subcategories. So when the subcategory then, and then an index in here. So you'll see what happens when I add this one into the view. It basically creates almost my whole case statement. But then I need to select everything, Control A. I'll go to my view data. So I'm going to look at my data in here. I'm going to just keep my the other way around, just going to keep my case in here. So this is the when all my categories. Once again, Control A, Control C, and on a PC at least. If I now then go in and create a calculated field, I can paste this in. And when you're building a case statement, hopefully you know that you need to do case first. And still it doesn't work because you need to go to the end to write in end. And then you have a case statement and, oh, sorry, I wrote case twice. Maybe that's the problem. The calculation is valid and you just have to change these values over here. So that's also a time saver when you're building parameters. We're moving on. I still have 250 more tips to go before Heidi takes over. No, not that many. This is something that is really nice because before, back in the day, well, first of all, it didn't work, but now you can go into, if you have multiple sets or parameters or filters in one particular dashboard, you can go in and format, but not just this filter or set control, but all filters and set controls on that said dashboard that you're in. So if I now just exaggerate a bit, you see that both of these, or all of them in this particular dashboard would change. Fortunately, it won't change for all your dashboards, so you still have to wait for future releases of Tableau when they will maybe create something called custom themes that they talked about at a conference earlier. So this is one way of doing a bit of save. If you would like to, if you have filters and you would like to add or get rid of the all, add an apply button to everything, you can do like I did at TC, where I hacked the XML. I don't recommend it. Then I rather go to Tristan's La Dataviz, where he actually has created a is it on a web page, I think, or like a very simple solution. Just put in your workbook and you can fix everything in one setting, and you don't have to hack anything because it's done in the background. Couple of more. The date properties. I live in Norway, and in Norway we never have 53 weeks, or very seldom at least, during a year. And that's because by default, if I right click on my date properties, my week over here, it's standard Gregorian. But in Norway and other places in Europe as well, I assume, we are using ISO. So if I switch over here, you see that well, in this case, at the moment I still have 53, but that's over multiple years. But now at least I have ISO week. But if now I create a new sheet, I still need to go in here, right click, change to ISO week and do this adjustment. Or do you have to? So if you right click on your data source, there's something, sorry, over here called date properties. If you click on it, by default, standard Gregorian, when does the week start? On a Monday for normal people, not on a Sunday. And then fiscal year, some companies have different fiscal years, etc. Can do changes here for the entire data source, and it works throughout the workbook. And for my case, I will change to ISO week, and obviously week starts on Monday. And then when I then add in my order date, get rid of this one, add in my order date, it's already ISO year, ISO week, etc. So you don't have to do that every time you add some new stuff in here. Then this is a really tiny one, but sometimes when you highlight furniture or office supplies, maybe you figure out that in this case I would like to highlight this, but also keep these colors. So you see that these are now bright orange, the other ones are toned down. But if I go to color, it's not, those colors are not available in here. But there is a trick that when you click over at your color legend, you can assign the highlighted colors to the palette. So if I do that, and I don't select anything, you see that now I have the dark orange and the other ones are toned down and they stick like this. Even though you can obviously highlight these, but these are now not as not as dark anymore. Two more. If you have old TDE files, so the Tableau data extract, which was replaced 200 years ago with the Hyper, that was version 9 or something. It's so many years ago. But I still experience when I open up really old workbooks or data like this, if I just drag it into this version of Tableau, this is 2024.3, it says it's depreciated, it doesn't work. You can follow these instructions at the community. There's multiple ways of hacking and doing stuff, but there's also a fairly easy way, or easier, it depends on how you look at it. So now I'm just going to open up 2024.2, so the previous version, go back to my file or my data source, drag this one. This is also a trick, obviously. You can just drag any data source workbook into the Tableau window. You see that it connected to my data source. If I right click on it and then extract it, because I would like it to have it extract data, and then to make sure that it works since it's a TDE, you will be able to, this didn't work because I now extracted it and wasn't a workbook with an extract. But just believe me, if this would have been a workbook with an old extract and not a data source, even though it was old, you will get a option over here to say upgrade extract. You upgrade the extract, you save it, and then it will open up in 2024.3 or newer. So the best examples are the ones that doesn't work, right? So I'll close this and then I'll finish up with the last one, because this was something that once again was talked about at conferences, DataFamEurope back in TC. And that is that if you go to the web browser, the edit Tableau Public or the Explorer version of Tableau in the browser, you can right click, you can use the built-in functions of spell check in your browser. Works excellent. But this is something that also works locally on a computer like this, as long as you have, for example, Grammarly installed. So now I'm just opening up Grammarly. You can download, install, and get a free user. It doesn't cost anything to use this. So Grammarly is now up and running. We'll see that it says spell check in desktop. What about these? Well, I already know there should be some. Let me just make some peoples like this. Let me make some errors. This is when you never prepare for what you do, you just gamble that everything works, right? So now when my Grammarly is up and running, hopefully, we'll see if it pops up eventually. Maybe not today. It doesn't work, does it? No, edit my title. Let me just double check to see if Grammarly actually shows up, because I just started. There we go. Just a bit late. It's late in the evening. It's taking a Christmas holiday. You see that it's now finding my errors. If I go back over here, it's still finding my errors. But if I now go, when I haven't opened up this dialog window, either on a title, caption, calculated field, whatever, if I try to click here, it looks like Grammarly understands to edit it, but it won't. You need to open it up like this so that you can edit the window. And then let's see what it suggests. For people, okay. And you have spell check in desktop. Just remember to turn off your Grammarly if you have a lot of different languages or other stuff up and running. So it is possible to use spell check in desktop. So that was my tips with some, hiccups. That's just how it should be. The workbook before and after is found on my Tableau public profile. So I'm going to stop share and give my sharing rights over to Heidi to see some cool tips.
Thank you so much, Tore. Those were some tremendous Tableau tips you showed us there. So let's see if I can compete with that. All right, so, in the Tableau community, there are two teams, team tiled and team floating. And if you are in the correct team tiled, then these are some tips for you. So even though I'm very much on the side of team tiled, I do like to float things occasionally, I will confess to that. So for example, here I have a floating text box that's essentially helping me along with this specific demo. So it's important to me as a developer, but I definitely don't want it visible for the end consumers, the people who will be eventually using this dashboard. So I would like to have it outside of the dashboard, right? But if I try to drag it out of the dashboard, you can see that Tableau says, oh, you don't want it on the dashboard. Let me delete that for you, which is not what I want. So what can I do? I can simply drag it over here outside with one end and then drag it outside with the other end of the box as well. And now I have this info container for developers outside of the dashboard, which will not be visible to end users. So what do I actually want to do here? I want to drag some items into the dashboard. And as you can see, Tableau likes to include everything we wanted to show, like the filters, the legends, the parameters, etc. And this is nice, but it tries to enter them as a vertical container, and I actually want them horizontal. So of course I could drag them into another container one by one, but let's find a faster way. So what I can do is I can insert a horizontal container, then take my vertical container by double-clicking on any item, dragging it into the horizontal container, and then just get rid of this vertical container so that everything's in the horizontal container and it's all next to each other. But then I decide I don't actually want all this stuff in here. First, I want to arrange all of my sheets and not have all of these items popping around. So what I like to do is I like to make this one floating, and I can do that by just dragging and pressing the Shift key. And we do the same thing as we did earlier. We just move this outside of the dashboard with one end, outside of the dashboard with the other end. And the fun thing is, because Tableau says this is the important container you currently have, if I insert another sheet now, it will drop everything that sheet brought to the table into that container as well. So it's outside of the dashboard. I can arrange my sheets and then bring these items back in later on when I'm ready. So I actually want to bring in this filter. Let's actually make this a multi-value drop-down, maybe. There we go. And you can see that I pre-selected Bridgerton here, which is nice because I like Bridgerton, but I don't want to publish this dashboard with some items pre-selected. So what I would like to do is just select all here. But the trouble is, this is a big data set. Like if you've played with the data and TV or data and movies data set before, you know that there's a bunch of data in here. So this chart now has, what does Tableau tell me? 32,000 marks. That's another tip. You can always see the marks count at the very bottom left-hand corner. And this takes ages to load, like in the worst case scenario. And I don't want my users to have a long initial load time. So what I like to do is I like to publish this with just nothing pre-selected. Now the thing is, when users see this, they go, oh, Heidi, the dashboard is empty, Tableau is broken, can't we use Power BI instead, right? And that's not a conversation I want to be having. So what do? We insert an info button, right? We insert an info box that says, hey, please select something. Let me actually bring in a floating, and yes, it's floating, even though I'm tiled, container. Let's actually give this a, let's give it an orange background. Yeah, let's go wild. And in here, I want to insert some text that says, please select a series from the filter. And as you can see, Grammarly would be really, really helpful here because there's a typo, but I can't be bothered to change it. So there we go. All right, so I have this info box, and that's okay. So users read this, and I'll actually insert a show height button because once they've read this, they can just select something from the filter, for example, 12 monkeys, and then they see the data. So they don't need the info box anymore. And of course, they can close it, but then the show info button button is still here. And I don't really want that. So how can I make this one vanish? Well, I can just drop it into the container that it actually vanishes. So if I close this button now, it vanishes the container that it's in itself. So you have a one-time only info button here that essentially vanishes itself. The only thing you need to do now is remember to undo that last step before publishing, because otherwise you can never get it back into the dashboard again. All right, let's talk about formatting, right? So especially for people who've just made the move from let's say, a more table-focused tool to Tableau, they may want to format some tables as well, and custom formatting is a fun thing that people ask for. So what can we do? I'm showing my season average rating in here, and I also want to see the comparison to the season average. So I have two measures in here essentially. Now, first off, I don't really want to see the average of the comparison to the average because that will usually be around 0. So if I want to hide the total, I can just right-click on the measure and then go to total using. And at the very bottom, you can hide that total so that we only have the total for the measures where we actually want to see a total. And now I would really like to color these numbers by the comparison to the season average. Now, the thing is, if I drag this to color, then everything gets colored by that, which is not what I want. I only want the comparison to the season average to be colored by itself, essentially. Now, we can't really do that. We can't color just one measure, but we can kind of get close. So what we actually want to color by is color by measure values. So we control drag this to color. And then when you have measure values on color, you can right click and use separate legends. So that gives you one color legend for the title rating and one for the comparison to the season average. And now I can double click on this IMDb title rating and change this to a diverging color legend. Make one side black, make the other side black. And then be sure to change this to a stepped color legend, which incidentally only has 2 colors. So now you have the title rating in black and the season average in actually colored. Now, of course, one thing I always forget is double click again and include the totals so they actually have the same color as the numbers, and then the totals are black as well. You can do that for the background as well. So if you change the marks type to a square, you can see that the background gets colored. Then, of course, you don't want it in black. You want it in white instead. Same thing, just change both sides of the color legend, and now you have a filled custom formatting in your table. You can also change the actual number formatting, not just the colors. So you can see I'm looking at the comparison to the season average. So sometimes it's above the average, sometimes it's below the average, and I want to make that really pop. So what can I do? Well, you can go to the default properties, right click, default properties, and change the number format. And here you can go to custom and insert a format. Now, what I like to do is I like to use an upward triangle plus for positive change, downward triangle minus for negative change. And the fun thing is you can use these special characters, so UTF-8 or other types of characters in here. And if I confirm and close with OK, you can see that those numbers are now formatted. Now, the thing is, Tableau formats my 0 values as well. And I don't really want that because upward triangle plus 0.0 is not really a change, is it? So what can I do? I right-click, default properties, edit the number format. And now here you can see everything in front of the first semicolon is for positive values, also used for 0. Then everything after is for negative values. And if I insert another semicolon, everything after is for 0 values. So I could insert a 0, or if I want to say, well, it's on par with the season average, I can just type in on par, and then you will be able to see that everything that has a 0 will actually just say it's on par with the season average without a calculation here. All right. So, in the data viz community, there's some controversy around whether you're allowed to truncate axes or not. And the very general rule of thumb is if you have a bar chart, you are never, ever allowed to truncate your axis. But what if you're using a line chart instead? What do you do then? Well, some people say you are allowed to truncate the axis, some say you aren't, so I don't want to make that decision. I want to leave that decision to my end consumers. So what can we do? We can create a parameter and call this one zoom axis. Question mark, so they know they can actually take an action. We change this to a Boolean value, and then we want to change the aliases. So if it's true, then yes, zoom in. If it's false, we say no, show axis in full. And we confirm and close with OK. we can right-click, show the parameter, and make sure that this is a single value list so you can see what I'm actually doing here. Now, next up, we need a calculated field. I want to call this my 0 line. And in here, we just want to check what's in the parameter. So if the zoom axis parameter is true, then I want null, else I want 0 end. Now, this seems like the most boring and confusing calculation ever, but you'll see why we need that in a second. So we confirm and close with OK, and this new field will be dragged to detail, and we can right-click on our axis and add a reference line. We want to use the value of our 0 line, which we just created, and I want to make this bright purple and big and beautiful and dashed so we can really make it visible here. So as you can see, you can't see anything, and that's exactly what we want, because currently our 0 line contains a value null because our zoom axis is on true. But if I say no show axis in full, then we will have our 0 line at the bottom here. So all we need to do now is right-click and edit our y-axis, and we leave it on automatic because we do want to adjust it if the values change, but we don't want to include 0, so we can uncheck that box. The thing is, it still includes 0 because we have the 0 line here. But if I say yes, zoom in, that 0 line takes on the value null, so it essentially vanishes, and we are automatically zoomed in. So all we need to do now is, if we are showing the 0 line, we can just grab it, edit, make sure we are not showing any kind of label, and get rid of the line. And now you can easily zoom in or show the axis in full, depending on what your users want. You can do the same thing with synchronization. So you can create a synchronize field. Oh, well, we have a parameter saying yes, synchronize, or no, leave independent. So we can right-click, edit our synchronize field, and take the maximum value of either the one axis or the other axis. And when we create a dual axis here, we can just move this field to detail, right-click and add a reference line here. Make sure you're using the synchronized value using the maximum, and then it's essentially the same thing. If you make this invisible, you can either leave independent or you can synchronize the axis very easily. All right, a couple more tips. So one about ranking. Here I'm looking at my favorite TV series, Taskmaster UK, and you can see that I am ranking all of the different seasons that we have here. And my personal favorite season is season number 4. And if I highlight this, you can see that the individual episodes of season 4 are in ranks 3, 7, 12, 12, 25, 25, etc. And the thing is, if I now filter on season 4, those get all re-ranked. And I don't want that. I want to know what is their rank in the overall comparison across all series. So why doesn't this work? That's because of the order of operations. If you've never looked at the order of operations, let me give you a quick overview. So we have extract filters. Those are the very first thing that pops up because they allow us to take a snapshot of the data. And if it's not in that snapshot, it's not physically available. Next up, we have data source filters. Those are at the very top of the query that gets sent to the data source. So if we tell the data source to not include something, it doesn't get returned to us. Context filters are a special thing, so we'll skip over them for now. But then are dimension filters. Dimension filters determine which rows get included from our dataset, which records. Then based on those records, we aggregate them into measures. So obviously measure filters come next. And on top of those measures, on top of those aggregations, we put another aggregation, which is the table calculation. So table calc filters come last. Now I am doing a ranking calculation, but I am filtering using a dimension filter. So of course my rank calculation will be affected. If I don't want it to be affected, I need to use a table calculation filter. And that's what we do. So back in this dashboard, I want to include all of the seasons again. Let me just create a calculated field, and we call this filter season. Now I want to use the lookup calculation. What does lookup do? If we check the documentation, lookup returns the value of the given expression in a target row. Perfect. So we want to look up the season, and we want to look up in a target row offset from where we're in, but we don't actually want to offset, so our offset value will just be 0. Now, Tableau will throw an error here because it's a table calculation, so of course we need to aggregate our season number. And because we're looking at individual episodes, that's all right, we can just take the minimum, because one episode will always have just one distinct season number, so that's all right. We can drag this one to, no, wait, let me right click and make this discrete. There we go. And if I drag this to the filters, you can see that I can now select season 4 and all the ranking will be retained here. So that works perfectly. And I think we're at time. So I just want to say thank you so much for listening to the tips. As Tore already said, you can find both of our workbooks on Tableau Public, so do check them out. And we hope to see you again here next year.